I'm Jonathan Karch with Three Rivers Archery. Today we're going to look at setting up a youth bow. What I have for us is one right off the shelf. This is a Mohican, right hand, 54 inch, 24 pounds. In the box you should have the riser packed up and a set of limbs with a rubber band on it. First thing to do is just kind of take everything out of its wrap. I always recommend being gentle with it. Never know if you have to put it back in there. And no plastic. This does make for good bow sleeves for right now if you don't have anything else. Now in the limbs, it is just going to be the limbs. There will be no bolts, no parts other than that. And the limb will have the curve to it. And the curve is to face away from you when we put the bow together, but we'll cover that later. And in with the riser, you should have the string and the knobs, the limb bolts, sorry. Just take the limb bolts out. Now if you want to keep them separated where the bottom one sticks to the bottom, go right ahead. They're identical, so it doesn't make too big of a difference. Now, nice thing with Mohican, it's a laminated riser. It has ammo bushings already installed and a plunger bushing already installed. So if you want to shoot elevated with a plunger or put on a quiver, sights, just about anything with AMO bushings. And it has a front stabilizer bushing, which you can put a stabilizer on or a bow fishing rig that sits out front. Anything that you need for that. Riser is cut past center, and as you can see here, it doesn't have any rest material. There should be one included with it though. I don't have it here. We're just looking at what comes right out of the box. Then the string. Now the first thing to do is take the bolts off, as I said. To decide which limb is the top limb, you can grab either one of them. And what you're looking for the bottom limb, is writing on it. Like I said, this is a 54 inch, 24 pound Mohican right hand. And when you put this limb on, it needs to sit so that you can still read it. Because if it was in the top limb, it'd be upside down. So this one is definitely the bottom limb. The top limb won't have any writing on the back there, so you can't get it confused with how it will sit. Just the biggest thing to remember is the bottom limb is always the one that has the specs of the bow on it. And that can be pretty universal. And what we have here is the limb pocket. And all you're doing is taking that bottom limb and sliding it into the limb pocket. Now the limb pockets will face away from you when you're shooting, so you'll also want the limb tips facing away. So right now, before we have this bow halfway there, this is the part facing away. That's where the limb tip's going to go. So the bow is facing away. You know, if it's right-handed or left-handed bow, when you're looking down the back of it, the shelf is cut out of the left side here for a right-handed bow. That way that the arrow sits on the left side. You hold the bow with your left hand. So let's get these limbs on here so we can see it a little bit better. Limb bolt, you just line it up. For these bows, you should be able to see right through it. And the biggest thing is that the limb bolt will screw right in. There can be a little bit of tension that's going to happen. Just kind of wiggle around there, try to line it up the best you can. You don't want to have to be reefing on it to get it in there though. If it's reefing on it from the beginning, give us a call and we'll work with you on that. See if it's something with a bow or maybe if you need a different bolt. Get it down there, just get it finger tight there. You don't want to over tighten yet. You can take the top limb. Remember, it doesn't have any writing on the back. You want the writing going to the outside of the bow facing away from you. And just do the exact same. Get it down to where it's finger tight. And this is where I go back and I like to put just a little bit more pressure. It can be about a quarter turn more. Now for the string, most strings will have a larger loop than the other. That would be the top loop. Looking at these, they're extremely close to the same. One is just slightly bigger. Biggest way you can tell if they're the exact same, you can't tell apart, is just make a guess to begin with. Put one on there. Slide it down the top of the limb to just about where it stops. You don't have to go too far because it will pull down as you put the other loop on. You go down the back of the bow, and like this one needed to go further down, so I just kind of put a little pressure to pull it down. You put the bottom limb in the string groove to begin with. You want that sitting there, and you want it to go even up the back. There is string grooves on the back of the limbs, or also known as the belly of the limbs, because it's the belly side faces you. That's where you want that string groove to sit. That string to sit is in the string groove. What I have here is a Selway bowstringer. They normally come in black. This one's purple, just an older model. You put that cup on the bottom limb. That way you make sure that's sitting in the middle, and that will hold it in place there. With the top part is kind of a rubber piece, rubber stopper. You slide that over both the tip and the string. It should be down below where the string is sitting. Have no interference with the string. Hang loose in the middle of it. The string's hanging loose in the middle of it. I like to slide it up to where basically the string kind of gives, or stops giving, because it's now with tension with the bottom limb. What you do here is you try to keep the string to the middle as you can, with this even amount of pressure and making sure that the bowstring is set on the bow correctly. You pull up on the riser. You only have to go a little bit, maybe 6 inches, and then just start sliding that bowstring down to the tip. And if you notice that you have to go further, pull the bow a little bit more. Don't worry about having it being too much pressure, because if the bowstring is not to that string groove, the bow still needs to go. It's going to be able to hold that weight because that's what the bow is made to do. Now we're in the string groove, and before you let any pressure off, you want to make sure that string is in the string groove even. Like I said, to determine which string loop is which, if they're both the same and you can't tell individually, I just put it on there. We guessed right. This was wrong. This string groove, serving material right in the middle of the bow would be farther down, so it's not even with the shelf of the bow. That should line up so there's plenty of space above it. That way when you put a string knock on, there's at least a few fingers worth above the string knock. For setting up the rest and plate for a youth bow, the Mohican that we have, what you get here is kind of the standard flipper rest. It's a molded plastic. It's called a flipper rest because basically you can flip it in and out. And it's just a little flipper that comes out of the rest. What this is also considered is an elevated rest. You won't be shooting off the shelf, but off an elevated rest. Nice thing with elevated rest is there's very little contact with the rest and the arrow, so it has less chance for interfering with your shot. Disadvantage is it being elevated and added onto the bow. There's chances of it coming off, falling off. It's just kind of a give and take there for it. This rest that comes with it has a piece of double-sided tape with a hole in it. The hole in there matches the hole in the actual rest. What you have to do is just kind of line it up the best you can, because one way it's going to have most of the actual stickiness covered, while the other way it just isn't covered. For this one, it has where that green-sided pattern is on the outside. So what you do then is you peel off the backing, stick it on the rest. The biggest thing to be concerned about is that it matches around that hole. If there's any hanging off the side, that's okay. You can trim it if need be, if you feel like you need to. You shouldn't really have to. There should be enough space on the actual bow shelf that it doesn't interfere. When you have that on there, nice and even, what I recommend is just making sure that this area is clean, clear of any debris. And this is the side plate on the actual riser. You can use a little piece of acetone, just a quick wipe on it, just something to keep it clean. And then all you do, peel the backing off on the rest, because it should already be stuck to the actual rest. Line it up over that plunger hole, and then press it flat down. There's not a whole lot of concern with keeping this level or even, because the rest is as small as it is and has a little contact. You don't need to worry about as much of being a perfect fit on there, because there's just a little bit of contact to it. Of course, you want to keep it level, just more for appeal. Press it down. I like to put a lot of extra pressure on there, really make sure that it's a good hold to it. So make sure you do it on a nice solid surface when you're doing this, so you can put a little bit of pressure down. When that's in place, let it sit just for a little bit just to make sure that it holds, and then when you're ready, set up a string knock that's set off of the elevated rest, since you don't want it set up off the shelf, because you're not shooting off the shelf, you're shooting off the elevated rest. So just make sure that knock point is set off the elevated rest.